From KPFK in Los Angeles, California, Valley Free Radio in Florence, Massachusetts, WNUC in Detroit, and BikeTalk.org worldwide, this is Bike Talk.
Bike Talk.
Welcome to Bike Talk. I'm Taylor Nichols.
And I'm Nick Richard.
So we got the survey up on our website and on some of our social media, and we're already getting some responses for it. I really encourage you, if you're listening to the show, take 5 minutes and answer our Bike Talk listener survey. It really helps us learn more about what we're doing, right, Nick?
That's right.
You know, where it's working, where it's maybe where it's not working. I wanted to pick up again, Nick, where we talked last week a little bit about the Scientific American article about bicycles and humans on bicycles being the most efficient land-based form of transportation. You know, that was an updated report from 1973, and it came back again in 2025. The human is a hyper-efficient terrestrial local motor. And I just love that. It's a HTL. And I started thinking about all the amazing things that humans can do on bikes. And, you know, a lot of these people we have talked about on the show in the past. Denise Mueller-Kornick rode her bicycle 183.9 miles an hour, drafting behind a dragster on the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah. And she rode her bike 183 miles an hour, a human. Jenny,
I can't believe that.
I know. Jenny Graham circled the globe unsupported in 124 days, riding her bicycle, averaging about 156 miles a day. I mean,
and that's mostly water.
But that's crazy, right? I mean, a human can ride the bike around the globe unsupported in 124 days. Filippo Ganna, who's an Italian bicycle racer, holds the hour record for riding the bike 56.7 kilometers, about 35 miles, in an hour. Crazy. Christoph Strasser, who is Australian, holds the record for the fastest solo crossing of the United States in the Ram race, the race across America, in 7 days, 15 hours, and 56 minutes. That's amazing that humans can do that on a bike. But if humans can do those amazing things, we can ride to the grocery store, and we can ride to work, and we can ride to school if our governments create safe places for us to do that.
Great point.
Yeah. Wow. Sorry about that. I've just been thinking about it all week. So
that's a good way of putting it. If we can do all that, you can go 1.5 miles to the store.
If it's safe. Yeah.
Right. You know what we have for the third week in a row?
Charlie Lighthizer news.
Charlie's news.
As of October 24th, the NYC DOT has set the speed limit for e-bike, e-scooter, and pedal assist bicycle riders in New York City at 15 miles per hour. The law seems a little bit confusing and problematic, though, because it doesn't seem to apply to regular bikes without any electric assistance. The question is also how they will enforce the new law. Cyclists in Seattle are celebrating a new bike path next to the East Marginal Way that is completely separate from the road that cars and trucks use. The project started in 2015 and has also been a big win for freight trucks getting in and out of the port in SoDo, with reinforced roads that shouldn't need repair for another 30 or 40 years. Look at that. Trucks and bikes both benefiting from a project. Inspired by the work that a guy called Empty Juan Dual did on his bike to get around and help victims in Valencia's massive flooding last year around this time, his sponsor Vielo and Chemnitz Institute of Technology in Germany collaborated to make ultralight cargo bikes out of recycled airplane parts. The bikes are less than 30 pounds and better equipped than cars to access difficult-to-reach areas in disaster situations like the one Spain experienced. People for Bikes has an updating webpage where they outline the potential impacts of tariffs on the bike industry and what can be done about them. The most recent update from October 21st mentions a 50% tariff on the aluminum and steel content of all imported bikes, frames, and e-bikes. The tariffs would obviously be a significant blow to everyone involved in the bike industry and riders alike.
This is the week of Halloween, and as we all know, Halloween is a great night for kids to go out and roam in their neighborhood and have a blast getting free candy. Lucy Maloney, who was on the show last week talking to Diana Lisa and is the council person up in Vancouver, Canada, has come up with a really great idea called the No Drive Halloween, Leave Your Car at Home campaign. Kids are all dressed up as goblins or whatever, and young adults or even adults might be drinking and driving, and that's just a bad mix all around. So this Halloween, leave your car at home and walk or ride your bike while you trick or treat. But while we're up in Canada, I wanted to introduce Dr. Carrie Mitchell, an associate professor of urban planning at the University of Waterloo. And she has a big obstacle in her backyard, the premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. Dr. Mitchell, welcome to Bike Talk.
Thank you, Taylor. It's great to be here.
Tell us what's going on with Mr. Ford. Why is he trying to impede bicycle movement around Ontario?
This is a really good question. And he's been working on this for a while now. Last year, around this time, actually, he introduced a bill called Reducing Gridlock and Saving You Time. And really what he was trying to do was to remove critical bike lanes from downtown Toronto. So that actually went all the way to the Ontario Supreme Court, and there was an injunction against him. And those bike lanes are still there for now. The Ontario government is appealing this decision, but for now they stay. And this year, he has introduced another amendment to our Highway Safety Act, and this is to remove the use of automatic speed enforcement cameras. Now, this is something that his government brought in 2019. So
Right.
they approved this in 2019, and now here we are in 2025, and he wants them removed. There was a lot of vandalism early this fall, late summer around these speed cameras, and instead of actually saying, no, we don't support vandalism, instead he said, sure, let's just take the cameras out. People like me and others who have put the effort in to put all this work to get these cameras going are saying, what is going on here?
Right. Well, besides the vandalism, what has been the result of the speed cameras? Do you know? Is there any data like slower traffic or less crashes or?
Absolutely. So we know just from a few months of data in the region of Waterloo, for example, where my university is, that those speed cameras have reduced on average speeds by 15 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
This is a big deal for us. Our premier says there's no big difference, 5, 10 kilometers, what's the big deal? But we know from the World Health Organization what the big deal is. And this can mean the
Right.
difference between life and death for a pedestrian or a cyclist. So 15 kilometers an hour, I'm struggling to do the miles per hour math in the moment.
Yeah,
Maybe
7, 8.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, 8 miles per hour. So this is a big deal when you're talking about safety.
Right.
Inside the car, it doesn't seem like that much. But for a pedestrian, especially a young child or an elderly person who's going to have even more risk from a collision with a car, these numbers matter. So we've
Right.
seen the data. They clearly work.
Great.
And so isn't Doug Ford also trying to make it illegal to do anything with a lane of traffic that's currently used by cars for anything other than cars?
Yeah, so that was in last year's Bill 212, the reducing gridlock. So you now require provincial approval if you want to put in bike lanes that take away a vehicle lane. So effectively, we can't add bike lanes to existing roads right now.
Wow. He just thinks people should be in cars.
Yes. I don't know if he truly thinks this is going to reduce gridlock and make movement in the city of Toronto faster. Certainly every single urban planning study that we've seen on this suggests that won't happen. You crack open your first textbook, in first year urban planning classes, and you talk about induced demand. So we know very well that this will not reduce gridlock. Building more highways and putting more cars on the road is really the last thing that we need in Ontario, and particularly in the city of Toronto. But this is the position of our premier, who now has a majority government, and really there is no opposition to this.
Wow. Well, it really is dispiriting, as we've been talking about, that the bicycle is the most efficient form of transportation on land, full stop. And we have people like Doug Ford and Eric Adams in New York and many other places around around North America fighting progress.
You have a petition, right, Dr. Mitchell?
I do. So I actually wrote a op-ed in one of our national newspapers back in September about this. And just from the point of children's safety, because Doug Ford had said, what's the difference? Like 5, 10 kilometers, who cares? And as I mentioned, it really does matter. And so out of that, I got a number of emails, and one of the questions was, okay, so what's next? So I started a petition. People have signed on and said, you know what? I agree. I don't want this legislation. I want speed cameras in our community safety zones. And these, just to clarify for your audience too, these were not on highways. These were not on major thoroughfares. These were placed in community safety zones. So near schools. There's some discrepancy. Some municipalities have perhaps widened the definition of that. Frankly, I think any residential area where there are people walking should be a community safety zone. So I don't have a problem with these cameras.
We have covered a fair amount of the issues going on in Ontario, and we have an audience there. How can the people find the petition and sign it?
Yeah, so my colleagues in Toronto started a Speed Cameras Save Lives.ca website. So you can go there. And what I also recommend is please write to your member of provincial parliament and please tell them that this is not okay. And I can say it myself, but we need millions of people across Ontario saying this.
Right.
This matters. And if you care about your kids or your grandkids or yourself, when you walk, because most of us are not only drivers, we also walk, and hopefully most of us cycle if you're listening to this podcast as well. And, protect your kids, protect yourself when you're walking, sign the petition. It's really not a tax, as our premier says it. It's simply a way to enforce the law.
Right.
And by taking this away, he's removing one of the critical avenues by which we can enforce traffic safety.
Right. It enforces the law fairly, and it doesn't do it right at the speed limit. There's usually like a 10, K an hour buffer zone. So it is ticketing people who are really speeding.
Exactly.
Dr. Carrie Mitchell from the University of Waterloo in Canada, thanks for all the work, and thanks for keeping us posted about what's going on up there. And thanks for coming on Bike Talk.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Taylor.
Well, as Ontario is banning speed cameras for cars, New York City is going to put a speed limit on e-bikes and e-scooters and any kind of electric multimodal transportation at 15 miles an hour. So cars can go as fast as they want, but e-bikes can only go 15 miles an hour, thanks to Mayor Adams in New York City.
There's something about the wiring of the brains of it's car brain.
Car brain.
There's an article in Streetsblog NYC called The Problem with E-Bikes, the super fast illegal ones.
Which
Basically,
I don't think should be called e-bikes, but we'll get into that later.
Well, here's Sophia Lebowitz, who wrote the article in Streetsblog NYC.
Great.
Hi, Sophia.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I feel torn because I want people to feel good about e-bikes because we know that e-bikes replace car trips, and we want people to use whatever they're going to use, and it expands people's range. There's all this bikelash in New York City, though, because of all these things that aren't really e-bikes.
A lot of people are feeling that way. People that, advocate for less car use and more micromobility use. But in somewhere like New York City, we're seeing a lot of, like you said, bikelash to e-bikes in general. And a lot of what we're seeing is attributing things that happen with these devices that aren't actually legal to the legal e-bikes that, people want to see used more. So I wrote this piece so that to kind of like set the record straight a little bit, like there are e-bikes and there are these illegal vehicles and they're different. And they look like e-bikes and they're marketed as e-bikes. One of the lawyers I spoke to for the story said e-bike isn't actually a term defined in the law. So in New York state law, an e-bike is actually called a powered bicycle. And I'm sure it's similar in other states, but basically the term e-bike is sort of colloquial. You can use it to describe anything. It's not a legal term. So you can say that you're selling what's really an illegal device and you can call it an e-bike online and sell it. And that's not like mislabeling it.
Well, what do you call them then?
They're technically called motorized scooters in the law. There is a classification for them. It's basically like anything with two wheels that you can sit on that's motorized, but that basically isn't an e-bike and isn't a moped. You know, in New York City, we have 3 classes of e-bikes and they can't exceed 25 miles per hour. Most of the times these motorized scooters, which are often marketed online as e-bikes, can go up to like 50 miles per hour. They're much faster and they're not regulated because they're not a part of the 3-class system. So a lot of times users can use an app to kind of change the speed threshold of the bike aftermarket as well. They're motorized scooters, technically, they're not e-bikes, but they look like e-bikes and they're marketed as e-bikes and they get wrapped into the whole e-bike backlash that we're seeing in New York City.
You know, you want to say that it's just irrational fear of new technology, but it's actually pretty rational if these things are going 50 miles an hour or 40.
You know, mopeds also can go faster, but they are licensed and they're registered with the DMV and they travel, or they're supposed to travel in the road with cars. Whereas these, you know, people buy them and think of it as an e-bike. They take them on bike paths. Like I highlight in my article, you know, the YouTuber Casey Neistat posted a video of himself riding one of these things in the Brooklyn Bridge bike path. And if you've ever ridden in New York City, you'll know that bike path is like extremely narrow. And to have someone going 37 miles per hour in the Brooklyn Bridge bike path would make anyone just sort of shudder. It's extremely scary. So people ride them as bikes in the bike infrastructure and closer to pedestrians, but they're not bikes. I mean, legally, they're not.
And so this is ruining it for everybody.
I guess you could say that. I think what's more happening, at least now in New York, is that there's just a lot of confusion around the different classifications of bikes, and we have a pretty confusing system. I'm hoping that this article can help at least simplify this part for people and just explain like these things are already not legal. And where we have a lot of politicians kind of proposing new laws and new ways to regulate e-bikes, I think it's important to point out the regulations that we already have in place that just maybe need to be tweaked or enforced better instead of like having these new laws that are more punitive.
You say in your article that enforcement is not the solution to this because, for one thing, the police can't tell the difference between e-bikes and these other.
Yeah, we see often that the police and the administration here in New York City don't really know the difference, one between just an e-bike and a moped, and then definitely not between all the different types of e-bikes. And it'd be pretty hard to tell just by looking if an e-bike is legal or one of these illegal motorized scooters, because a lot of them do have this sort of motorcycle style and you could sort of tell, but then there are other perfectly legal e-bikes that have this style as well. So it's sort of hard to know. Some people want more point of sale regulation, but it's hard because these are technically already regulated at the point of sale because they're not legal to sell. But the problem is people are able to buy them online really easily. And there's no evidence that the city is really doing anything to stop the online sale of these bikes. They do give violations and confiscate bikes at like retail stores, but they didn't give me any evidence that they were doing anything for the online sale.
And another thing you say in your article is that in New York City, Class 3 e-bikes, what would be classified Class 3 e-bikes in other parts of the country actually are not legal in the city, right? Because they're...
Yeah, it's sort of a two-part issue. There's these illegal motorized scooters that are really out of the realm of legality, right? They go super fast. They're not Class 1, Class 2, or Class 3. They have like different modes you can switch in and out of. But then New York City's definition of a Class 3 e-bike is that it can go 25 miles per hour with the use of a throttle. And like the federal definition of a Class 3 e-bike is a bike that can go 28 miles per hour with the use of pedal assist. So it's slightly different. That can actually cause trouble for people who are trying to purchase a bike legally. That's like within New York City's regulations. You could order a bike online from a big name brand company like Trek, where you can buy a Class 3 bike that goes up to 28 miles per hour. Let's say you get into a crash and you get hit by an uninsured driver or the driver flees the scene. If the bike goes over 25 miles per hour, then it's technically not legal in the city and you won't be entitled to the no fault insurance program that we have here, which helps give money to victims of crashes where the driver is uninsured or flees the scene. So it kind of puts you in a less safe position. And I don't think a lot of people know that when they buy a bike like that from a reputable brand. So there is a law, a proposed bill from Councilmember Crystal Hudson, a Brooklyn council member. She wants to just get rid of Class 3 in New York City, and a lot of people are saying that would just make things simpler. And that would be essentially limiting all the e-bikes in the city to 20 miles per hour.
I mean, I have a Class 3 e-bike. If I didn't talk to you and read this article, I would have thought I could ride it in New York City. It doesn't feel that fast.
Right. I mean, odds are you could ride it, you wouldn't get stopped or anything, but it's just like one of the lawyers I spoke to was saying he's seen situations where he has a client that didn't know that they had one of these bikes that weren't legal technically. You can get screwed if you get into a crash with somebody that doesn't have insurance or something like that. The bill would be a point of sale bill. It would not make it illegal to ride a New York City Class 3 e-bike. It would just be to sell it. So all of the people that already have them in the city, like most delivery workers have a Class 3 bike. If they own their own bike, they wouldn't be penalized for using a bike they already have. It just would be that you can't buy a new one.
But would that solve the problem of all these other?
No, no, because the bikes that I've mostly focused the story on, the motorized scooters, those are already illegal.
Okay. So if these are already illegal and we're saying that enforcement is really not going to work unless I guess we trained all the police to identify the differences. But even then there's like profiling is a problem. Yeah. We don't want to rely on enforcement.
Right.
Well, what are people leaning towards for a solution?
I think, some are leaning towards some sort of enforcement for the most obvious, like offenders of this. One person I spoke to suggested like maybe setting up a trap like in Central Park, where if somebody rides by on something that's clearly going so much faster than a regular e-bike, looks like one of these illegal ones, you could stop them and check it and sort of do it in a public way that sends a message to people like, oh, now the cops are sort of noticing this. And that would maybe curb some of the use. We saw that happen. We were having an issue with a lot of mopeds using bike lanes, especially over the bridges. That was an education problem. A lot of delivery workers had mopeds and just didn't know that they weren't allowed to ride them in the bridge bike paths. They started putting signs up and setting up some enforcement traps. And people do notice anecdotally that there has been less mopeds on the bridges, on the bike paths. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly, to be honest, the best way to deal with this. I think awareness, is kind of like the first step. I think a lot of people just don't know about it, even like local politicians. We've seen this also with uncertified e-bike batteries. Trying to regulate the sale of them has been difficult. There is some sort of geo block where like if you try to order a non-UL certified battery on Amazon in New York, you're not supposed to be able to. So I'm not sure if they could do something like that with these online retailers and then continue to check up on in-store retailers and make sure all the bikes that they're selling are legal. It would be enforcement split between the police department and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, which could do more of the point of sale type of enforcement that we probably need more of.
I guess if you can't stop guns, you probably can't stop e-bikes.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's always going to be bad actors, right? Like there's always going to be people that modify their cars or, modify their bikes to make them be able to go faster. I think it's just right now there's sort of the lack of education and like a problem with messaging around these bikes, and the illegal ones are getting bunched in. And I think it's important to have a distinction between like the system we already have to regulate the bikes so that people aren't just calling for all of these new laws that maybe are redundant.
Are they implementing that 15 mile per hour e-bike speed limit?
Yes, it is supposed to be implemented starting this Friday. It sort of remains to be seen what that means, right? Like we haven't seen any signs go up. The only thing we've seen the city do so far is put these speed signs in Central Park on the main loop. I don't know how e-bike riders are going to know that they now can only go 15 miles per hour. It's only for e-bikes, not for traditional bikes. I'm not sure how it will be enforced or how it will be rolled out.
So when you say this Friday, I just want to make it clear that'll be the 24th. Probably
yes, Friday, October 24th is when the e-bike speed limit will go into effect in New York City.
Well, it all sounds very confusing and like there's no clear fix.
Yeah, it is confusing. And I think the first step is kind of getting lawmakers and the people with power to understand these things. and what the regulations already are and what the different devices are and what people are using and what they're using them for, so that they can make more informed decisions. Because we see constantly like the NYPD posting photos, handing a bike safe pamphlet to the rider of a moped, where there's just a disconnect that doesn't help.
But at least people who listen to this and who read your article can not break the law and not get into a situation where they won't be insured because they're riding the wrong kind of bike.
Yeah. And I do think there's definitely people that, just Google e-bike. They see one that they like, that's a good price. They order it to their house. I don't think that like everybody buying one of these is necessarily a bad actor. I think they would want to have that coverage of that no fault insurance. Hopefully people will be able to make more informed decisions, and maybe an education campaign is a part of this, that what the city can do, to help this.
Because there's great bike paths in New York City. It's a shame if people are not able to use e-bikes.
Yes, there are really great bike paths in the city, but sometimes these illegal motorized scooters can add danger to them. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, a pedestrian was getting off the bus and crossing the Greenway on Flushing Avenue and was hit by a rider of one of these illegal motorized scooters, and she was killed by him. So, that was sort of the impetus for the article, and to kind of look into these bikes, because obviously all of the headlines read pedestrian struck and killed by e-bike. And we wanted to look into it and say, like, this is a safety problem, but it's not, that vehicle, isn't actually an e-bike, it's an illegal motorized scooter, and kind of outline, what are these and how people are getting them.
It's so important to bring awareness about that. Yeah. Thanks for your article, Sophia. The Problem with E-Bikes, the Super Fast Illegal Ones by Sophia Lebowitz at Streetsblog NYC.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
What I get from that, one of the things is that there's no easy answers, and that it's,
it's confusing.
Yeah. But another one is that you can be not covered after getting hit because you have the wrong kind of e-bike through no fault of your own, really.
Right. Right. And, I think this is a legal issue a little bit. And Jim Pocrass, our lawyer from Pocrass and De Los Reyes, has talked about this before, and he's back with us today. Jim, welcome back to Bike Talk. You were saying that you have cases like this in your office now.
That's exactly right. Thank you for having me back here. Right now, I have 3 cases where, people are on e-bikes, and I'm having such difficulty with regard to the coverages and the legal aspects, because of the fact that the e-bikes have not been properly designated as to whether or not they're legal or illegal in California. So one of the biggest problems is if I have a crash and it's involving an e-bike, either they were the person that caused it hitting somebody else, or even if the fact that some vehicle, struck them, a hit and run, and they were injured as a result of it, the classification of that e-bike will determine, what coverages they have or what coverages they don't have.
So you're saying that if the person who either hits the crash or gets hit in the crash, if they're riding an illegal e-motorcycle or e-bike, that their insurance or the other party's insurance may not cover them because it is deemed an illegal mode of transportation.
Right. And let me explain to why that happens. Because if it is not classified as an e-bike, then it becomes a regular vehicle under the vehicle code. And therefore, you have to have certain things in order to be able to bring a claim or even to bring a recovery. And that would be, one is to have a motorcycle license. You have to have a motorcycle license if it's not declared an e-bike. Number 2 is that you have to have insurance, that will cover a motorcycle. Usually, if you're on an e-bike, just a regular e-bike, you'd be covered under your automobile policy while you're riding that. Or if you get hit, you'd be covered under your own automobile policy if the person is uninsured or doesn't have enough insurance. And so, and that's something that a lot of people don't know, that when you're riding a bike, you are covered under your automobile policy, of course, if you have one. If it's not an e-bike, then you may not be covered under that. And 3, you may have to register that e-bike, motorcycle, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, when you buy a bicycle at the local bike shop down the street, you don't have to buy insurance for your bicycle also. But it sounds like with these kinds of e-motorcycles, or however we want to designate them, that maybe the city should step in and make you make the buyer also purchase insurance? Because it seems like the city needs to classify these differently. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, well, the city has to catch up to the innovations that are coming along with the e-bikes. The e-bikes, when they first came out, were going under 20 miles an hour. They were pedal assisted. They were, like bicycles. Now, as technology has gotten better, with regard to the batteries and other things, I mean, these e-bikes, okay, can now go 28, 30, 35, 40 miles an hour. They're no longer classified as e-bikes.
Right, right. And we've talked a little bit about the classification, and Sophia talked about that in the article. I mean, in your interview, Nick, about whether it has a throttle and how many miles if it goes over 28 miles an hour. It really sounds to me, Jim, like we need to reclassify these kinds of modes of transportation and not call them e-bikes.
That's exactly right. And if you're delivering something for a company and you're riding an illegal e-bike, that company could be responsible for it and not have insurance because they're riding like a motorcycle and not an e-bike. There are various programs in states. Okay, California has some, New York has some, where if somebody's hit by somebody, they have funds that will pay for your medical treatment and compensate you for injuries. If it's determined an illegal bike, you may not qualify for those programs.
Wow.
And that could be really devastating. Again, it's not the bike. It's more the fact of, getting the regulations on being able to identify those bikes and have the cities adapt to those bikes and then have proper places where they can be. Don't put them in a bike lane or some place where somebody can be really hurt.
Yeah, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and, nix e-bikes in general, because as you said earlier, e-bikes are a game changer for everybody and are really wonderful.
The e-bikes ever since COVID have exploded. The amount of use of e-bikes since that point has become tremendous. And I think that it should continue. The cities and everybody just needs to catch up to it.
Great. Jim Pocrass of Pocrass and De Los Reyes. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Most of the problem with the e-bikes are these illegal, really fast e-bikes that are used mostly in New York City by food delivery people, DoorDash, Grubhub, and things like that. And they are incentivized to speed. You got to get the food there fast.
Right. We have this clip from a mayoral debate, and the three candidates, Andrew Cuomo, is it Andrew or Mario?
Andrew.
Is it?
Yeah.
We have Andrew Cuomo, who's a Democrat, I guess.
Right.
Curtis Sliwa,
Right.
A Republican, and Zohran Mamdani, who's got that Obama energy.
Right.
And the question is about giving tickets to the riders of e-bikes. And here's the candidates' answers.
The city recently enacted a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit for e-bikes. And of course, there are the other motorized two-wheelers that also frequently ignore red lights and other traffic laws. If you were mayor, would you direct the NYPD to ramp up speeding tickets and other moving violations on the motorized two-wheelers, Mr. Cuomo?
Yes. Look, this is a dangerous situation for many people.
Mr. Mamdani, yes or no?
I would actually build on the city council's progress in holding the apps accountable like DoorDash and Grubhub to ensure that there weren't incentives for breaking those street traffic
So
laws.
you would not increase ticketing the riders?
I do not think the police should be the ones dealing with the failures of these app companies.
Mr. Sliwa.
License them, register them, and yes, do enforcement on them.
You got to love that, Nick, because he puts the pressure on where it should be, on the app makers, on the DoorDash people.
Mamdani.
Not on the poor guy that's trying to make a living.
Yeah. DoorDash gave $1 million to Cuomo. I wonder why.
Yeah. We've been talking with Josh Bowden of Adventure Cycling about helping plan a long distance bike ride. And this is our second chance to talk to Josh about the logistics of a bike ride. We talked last week a little bit about, the reason and the route and stuff. And this week, Josh has us talking about the logistics and planning of the ride. Josh, thanks a lot for coming back on the show and helping us plan a trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad we can do this over multiple weeks, topic by topic.
Right?
Planning a trip can be complicated. So nice to break it down.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the logistics and the next stage of planning. Last week we talked about, what is the reason that, I or anyone is planning a long trip and how important that reason is, and what is the sort of route that, whoever wants to go. And I had told you that I have this idea of biking from my daughters in San Francisco to my father in Michigan. And I kind of wanted to go the north route, which is, that Lewis and Clark route a little bit. And I think
Hmm.
I'd mentioned last week even that I read that book, Undaunted Courage by Stephen Ambrose, and it just
Hmm.
really turned me on to that part of the country. So what is the next step now that we've established a reason and route, or not even a route, but an area that we want to go through?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely is you have to start thinking about the timing, with your life, especially long trips take up a long time. So you got to make sure it works with your life. So we had also kind of mentioned, but before we started recording, that the time that you were going to do it in is around like late spring, early summer, May,
Right.
June. So that definitely affects your options. There's the option to go up the Pacific coast and then go inland upwards towards like Oregon or so, or there's an inland option, kind of go toward the Sierras Tahoe area. With your limitations, or not limitations, the time of your life where you have
Sure.
to do this, snow is still definitely a big factor in May, June. So going up into the high Sierras area, you could do it, but it's probably going to be pretty cold and snow would be a factor. So that plays into your route decision. Now it's like going along the coast is probably a bit more ideal situation given your timing. So you can get a few weeks on the temperate coast, and then by the time it hits June, things are warming up, you're going inland. That's another thing to think about when you're planning a trip, is just like, when can you do it? If you're free in the winter, you probably shouldn't be going into the northern states. You should probably be sticking down south, Arizona, New
Right.
Mexico areas.
Right.
That's going to affect your decisions.
Right. And when you say the different routes, you're kind of looking at the adventure cycling country map. That's what I
Yeah.
did. I kind of looked at the map and saw these different color paths that go from San Francisco to Portland, or San Francisco to Tahoe, or San Francisco to Denver. And
Yeah.
I just kind of picked the one that I thought would fit my timing.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, the map you're mentioning on our website covers 50,000 plus miles of routes. So you don't have to do too much planning on your own end if you want to go that route. You just look at our map like you did, find the ways to connect things, and get the information you need, the paper maps or the digital information, and you're off to the races pretty quickly. The planning's pretty much done. That's
Right.
the advantage of doing a pre-made route, is that people have written it. There's notes, there's logistics already planned out. You're not having to do all the legwork. Being with adventure cycling, we have a lot of information. There's a lots of other people out there with routes as well, other websites like Bikepacking Routes, bikepacking.com, or the app Ride with GPS. You can go on
Right.
there and find other people's routes as well. There's so much information if you're trying to find a pre-made route. Probably have a hard time picking one. You'll be overwhelmed
Right.
with options
Right.
potentially.
Right. And there's also that Great American Rail Trail. We've talked to
Mm,
them on the show before, and they are trying to connect a whole route across the country of rail trails, meaning that it's
mhm.
off roads with cars and just on abandoned train routes, which is also sounds great to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a big beauty of bike trips is it's pretty easy to plan your own route. There's so many roads and paths you can take. So if you want to go the DIY unique route option, it's it's pretty great, and there's a lot of ways to do it. But if you don't want to do all that legwork, there's so many resources. Yeah, the Great American Rail Trail, or sometimes called the GART. There's so many organizations out there trying to put these things together, not just us, but people making, especially these like off-road bike routes where you're
Right.
not contending with traffic. That is becoming a larger priority that people are wanting.
Sure. On the routes that we're looking at, leaving San Francisco, going north up the coast, I think is sort of what you said, just because of the time of
Hmm.
year. Is that along Highway 1, or do I have to get the map to see that? How do I figure that out? And how do I know about food? How do I, plan on getting food or places to sleep, or
So for your route, that would be mostly up Highway 1. There's really not another option. If you
right,
can't do the Highway 1, you've got to go a very long ways around on other roads to get around it. But so usually you're up Highway 1. It's a really popular cycling destination, so people generally know that there's going to be bikers there. But to the planning, big trips are overwhelming. You're like, how do I plan a 2-month trip? How do I know what I'm doing day to day? My usual approach to that is breaking a trip down into stages or approaching a long trip like a series of back-to-back shorter trips.
Right.
You can break that up into like major town to major town. So, maybe from San Francisco to the next big town north, major town to major town. You could go week to week if that's more your thing. I tend to think of where I'm going to get my major resupplies. So I'm thinking like, okay, if I'm getting food in this town, I'm going to get my next batch of food 2 to 3 towns later or 2 to 3 days later. And that's how I tend to chunk up my trips into understanding. It makes it much more approachable. And then you can plan those little steps.
Well, let me ask you, how much food do you take on your bike, and how much food do you plan on getting in restaurants or coffee shops or food marts along the road?
It's a really big personal preference. Obviously, grocery shopping at the grocery store and cooking it yourself on like a camp stove or backpacking stove situation, significantly less expensive.
Right.
Sometimes it can be a bit hard to shop because especially if you're traveling solo, like you're planning on doing, it's hard to carry all those groceries with you sometimes, but it just kind of depends on what you're feeling. Most of my trips, I tend to like to do my own food, mostly because it's less expensive. And it gives you that flexibility of like, I don't have to make it to the next restaurant to get my food or the next gas station to get a snack. I have it with me.
Right, right. Yeah, I think we had talked about that. My plan is to take camping stuff with me. I would bring a camp stove. I do a fair amount of backpacking and camp 3-4 nights in a row and then stay in a hotel on maybe the 5th night or something like that. But I like to eat in restaurants and drink coffee. I can see myself, kind of going from diner to diner or something.
Yeah, that's the beauty of biking is you are usually going between like so many towns. It's easy to carry like coffee or fresh food with you, like vegetables and fruits and other things versus like backpacking. As it sounds like you've done it before, so you can't really carry that stuff super well. I think that helps a lot with the temptation. Backpacking, you get to town, you're ravenous for fresh foods and salads and greens. Versus on a bike, you can carry those things with you all the time. So maybe that temptation's a little lighter, but definitely nothing wrong with stopping at the diner regularly to get your coffee and get that type of stuff. That's a really easy way to lighten the logistic load for sure.
Right. So is there any difference in going north, south, or east, west as far as weather or wind or anything like that?
It really mostly depends on the weather. I mean, thinking as you're moving, as you go up the coast, and once you move inland, you'll be going, west to east, which the weather tends to come in off the Pacific. Living here in Montana, most of the weather comes from that direction. We get it from Idaho, Washington. So predominantly winds will blow that direction. So hopefully that means you have a lot of tailwinds on your ride, which would be really
Famous
good.
last words, right?
Famous last words. Yeah. You can say predominant prevailing winds, but every day is a little bit different.
Sure.
Well, like you were saying about like, how do I get to the start? There's a lot of different ways to do it. Depends on your trip, like a lot of Amtraks now have like you can check your bike onto it. So you don't even have to package it up. You can ride your bike to the train station, have all your gear on it, maybe take it off if you might need to, but you just put your bike on, you take the train and boom, done. It's pretty simple. I always like to advocate of thinking about just riding from your front door, which you're kind of doing. You're just using multimodal transportation to get there. So always, if you can start from the front door, it tends to be a little bit cheaper.
Sure. And I would ride from my front door to the train station.
Yeah, that's
at
awesome.
Union Station in downtown LA.
I love a good front door adventure. I think those are super cool.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm in San Francisco. How do I get out of San Francisco?
There's probably going to be a lot of ways. I'd have to do some research and look at it. But, if you're going to be riding up the Pacific Coast, you could look at Adventure Cycling's Pacific Coast route and, find your way from wherever you are in San Francisco and try to get there. Another thing you could look at, which I do a lot on trips, is Google Maps has a feature where it can show like where bike lanes are and bike infrastructure and other things like that. I'm imagining that you're probably going to be in San Francisco proper. So you're going to have to ride over the Golden Gate Bridge, essentially. That's going to be the landmark to shoot for to get onto the highway and get headed north.
Yeah.
But yeah, just find your way to the Highway 1. Pacific Coast is pretty simple navigationally. You're just going on that highway for a long, long time.
Right, right. And I get those maps from Adventure Cycling. And you said you have digital and paper maps.
We do, yeah. So we're most of people find us because of like the routes that we're talking about and the paper maps we offer.
Right.
Always advocate for having paper maps just because phone batteries can die and other things. So good to
And
have the
service,
backup.
cell service, right? I mean,
Yeah, cell service. Luckily, you can get around that these days mostly. Like I'd mentioned, Ride with GPS, which is like a biking app that it's like a navigation app. We are in the process of putting all of our routes onto it, but you should be able to get like the Pacific Coast route and put that into your Ride with GPS app on your phone. And now you can download that so you don't have to use cell service to look at it
oh,
or navigate off of it. It's all available offline. Now you're still using GPS on your phone, which kills the battery.
right.
So yeah, there's the thing of like you still want some kind of paper information just in case those batteries die.
Yeah. Plus, I just like paper maps. I
Absolutely.
like holding them and touching them. We've been talking on the show lately about dynamo hubs as a way
Mm,
of powering our bike lights. But
mhm.
I think they have dynamo hubs that also power your cell phone, I think. Do you know anything about that or not?
I do. This is a pretty niche topic, but Dynamo hubs are awesome. If you're a commuter or if you're a long distance biker, I think you should check it out. One thing that about Dynamo hubs is unless you have some kind of electric converter, I believe that the type of electric current your phone needs to be charged or like a portable battery bank is different than what your Dynamo hub generates.
Oh, I'm glad you
So
told me that.
most of the time you're not able to plug your Dynamo directly into your phone into your phone. You have to plug it into a battery bank and then plug your phone into the battery bank.
Oh, okay.
It's like a direct current, alternating current situation. I'm not an electrician. I'm not super versed in that, but I've heard that that's the issue most people come across. There's
Okay.
not
No,
like
I'm
a
glad you told me
direct
that
connection.
because, yeah, because we've been talking about lights, as it gets
Hmm.
darker, we've been talking with our mechanic, Jim Cadenhead, about, different light situations. And one of the things that I really liked what he said was the dynamo hubs.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. Definitely something to look into. The electric component of Dynamo hubs is definitely something to research thoroughly
I
before you
will.
start diving into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what kind of mileage do you think? I mean, obviously you don't know the kind of rider I am or anything like
Mhm.
that, but what kind of mileage do you recommend for people? I mean, I'm thinking I could do comfortably 60 a day or something like that. Does that sound reasonable with a loaded bike?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a pretty good mark that a lot of people can hit. Like you said, it's very personal. It's based on some of your logistics. Like if you're on a trip where you're a bit crunched for time, maybe that's an indication that like you need to train a bit more and like anticipate having longer days. It might be a bit more of a physically challenging trip, which might be something you want. That might be a priority. Or if you have more time, you can afford to take a little bit more, do lower mileage. So there's really not like a recommended mileage I would offer. It also depends on your route. On yours, luckily, you'll have lots of places to get food and services. You're never going to be incredibly remote. So you're not pressed to have a high mileage versus if you're
Right.
doing a more remote off-road route, then if you don't want to be stuck carrying tons of food and tons of water, you might be required to do a higher mileage just because of the logistics. But mostly, well, especially as you're warming up, you're getting into the trip on the coast, you'll have lots of logistics. And as you go
Right.
inland, you'll probably get to more remote areas, but by then you'll have been on your bike for 2, 3+ weeks. You'll be in the groove. And if you need to do a bigger day, you might have to wake up earlier, take a little less breaks. But by then you'll be pretty seasoned and you'll have figured out your routine.
Right. Let me ask you also, do you take a lock?
It depends. On some of the more remote trips I do, I don't bring a lock, which is a personal choice. I think some people might cringe at the thought of like
Sure.
not having a lock with them. But when I'm in places where I'm in towns more often around more population, I will bring a lock. And especially as you're, touring, weight is a factor. Usually, I really love chain locks with like the Kevlar wrapping around them. I feel like those are kind of maybe harder for someone to break into because it's wiggly. You can't keep it still,
Right.
and they're pretty light. And you throw it in your bag and it coils up. But there's also those foldable locks that go on like
Sure.
your water bottle bosses. I think those are usually what most people reach for when they're touring because they're compact, they're very lightweight, they're a pretty good option.
Okay, good. I
So it
just was
depends
always
on
sort
your
of
route.
curious. Yeah. I don't see people at a tourist location, a monument of some kind or whatever, hassling my bike. But I could see it if I was in a town and the bike was parked, outside a store or something like that, that someone might hassle with it. So I think I will
Yeah,
bring one of those coil locks. Sounds about right.
I think even something like a simple lightweight cable lock with like a kind of padlock situation, that's going to stop 95% of
Right.
people. They're opportunists. If they can grab the bike and walk away immediately, they will. But if there's any barrier on a trip, they're probably not equipped and ready to cut that thing with a bolt cutter and take off.
Right.
It just depends.
Yeah, I hope not. Well, so great. That kind of gives me a pretty good idea of how to get started. I would look at the route and look at maybe 60-mile intervals of places to shoot for. And again, because I am camping, I don't have to make that town or that area. I can just find a place to pitch my tent when, the day is starting to wane and not have to worry about it. But that gives me an idea of how I might schedule each section of the ride.
Yeah, and especially planning that out for your trip will be easy since you're using predominantly pre-made, scouted, vetted adventure cycling routes. Those maps and those GPS files will point out like, here's the grocery stores, here's places to get water, here's all the campgrounds. Like all of that stuff has been put ahead of time. That's the benefit of like doing these pre-made routes is all the routes we published, even before we published them, someone has gone out there and has checked the route on the ground. There was a person with, in the field, eyeballs out there checking things. Just for example, just recently we published a new route all in Canada around the Vancouver area. And I got to go out and scout that route on the ground. So like when people become members and they donate to adventure cycling, it's, that's what they're paying for is like a route
they're
has
paying
been
for you to go on a
published.
bike ride.
They're paying for me to go on a bike ride. Yeah, honestly, it was a bit of a vacation. I'm not
Sure.
going to lie.
Yeah.
But when you get that route and you're like, I want to go do this trip, that someone has been out there, they've ridden the entire thing, they've seen it all on the ground, and it's vetted and it's good to go.
Right. Josh, so far we've covered reason and routes and logistics and planning. Next time we talk, we'll talk a little bit about how we set up our life for being gone a month or a month and a half and how we kind of plan restocking through the mail and getting all that kind of stuff set up for the trip. And then after that, we'll talk about actually preparing our bike and how we might pack the bike and a repair kit and, things like that.
Absolutely. When you're gone for a month, month and a half, or even longer, it's a little bit of a different ballpark.
Right.
We can give you a bit of a preview. Save enough money for the trip and then save more because it's probably not enough. Those diners are going to look real appealing when you've been out there for a couple days. So get extra money. Save more money than you think.
Well, that's a great note. Josh Bowden of Adventure Cycling, thanks again for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
That was Josh Bowden of Adventure Cycling, and I'm going to talk to him again about the rest of the stuff that takes to plan a long bike trip.
When are you going to take this trip?
Late spring, early summer next year. Those are good times for me to travel because the acting business slows down a little bit then. Network TV slows down. So that's a good time to travel. And that's my plan.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
It's always hard when you talk to anybody who's done it.
Right. And speaking of the acting biz and Halloween, because we were talking about Halloween earlier, I was up in Vancouver recently when I was riding in the rain with Lucy Maloney. I was shooting the CBS show Tracker. My episode, the Halloween episode, airs this Sunday, November 2nd on CBS. And that's the same day that the time changes, right, Nick? It changes from daylight savings time. We fall back. So it'll be a little bit lighter in the morning, but a little bit darker earlier in the evening. So use those lights that Jim Cadenhead was talking about.
Cool.
Yeah. So see and be seen. And, one last thing while we're talking about TV and film, the 25th anniversary of the Bicycle Film Festival is next weekend in New York, November 7th through 9th. And you can get more information at bicyclefilmfestival.com.
Great. Good show.
Yeah. We want to thank Dr. Carrie Mitchell of the University of Waterloo, Jim Pocrass of Pocrass and Dale S. Rays, and Sophia Lebowitz of Streetsblog NYC, and Josh Bowden of Adventure Cycling. We also want to thank our regulars, Julie Richard, Josh Hagland, Charlie Lighthizer, Kevin Burton, Amy Ziering, Stacy Randecker, and Lindsay Sturman.
And you got a quote?
Our quote is, once again, take the listener survey, please. It really helps us make the show better. It's at our website, biketalk.org, and on our social media posts.
Like Blue Sky, Instagram.
Is it on Facebook? I don't know if we put it on Facebook.
We should.
Yeah, we have to get Charlie on that.
We have a group page. All right. Thanks, Taylor.
Ride safe.
This episode of Bike Talk is sponsored by the law offices of Pocrass and De Los Reyes, with offices in Los Angeles and Bakersfield and serving all of Southern California.
Bike Talk is a project of CRSP and the Los Angeles Eco-Village Institute.
And that was Bike Talk. If you have a story, a tip, or a topic, head over to biketalk.org and send us a message. Talk again next week.
Push on a pedal, get your heart started. Push on a pedal, push it down and up again. Push on a pedal, get your heart started. Push on a pedal, push it down and up again. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, push your feet on the pedals, and ride it all around, ride it all around. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, push your feet on the pedals, and ride it all around, ride it all around. Oh, get that car out of my way. I wanna ride my bike today. It keeps me fit, get me there. I won't go stinking up the air. Leave behind the daily grind. Let your mind unwind. Live its life, pretend to life. Better get yourself a bike. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, put your feet on the pedal, and ride it all around, ride it all around. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, put your feet on the pedal, and ride it all around, ride it all around. Get that car out of my way, I wanna ride my bike today. It keeps me fit, gets me there, I won't go stinking up the air. Leave behind the daily grind, let your mind unwind. Live its life, pretend to life, better get yourself a bike. Got yourself a bike. Oh, 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 got yourself a bike.